Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers lose to the Los Angeles Kings by a final score of 4-3. The Rangers have now lost 10 of their last 12 games, 2 8-2 specifically. And what we saw in this game wasn't too dissimilar to the Anaheim Ducks game, um, where, you know, ends up being kind of more of the high scoring variety type of game. I kind of felt like maybe it wouldn't be given sort of the Kings play style, but these days the Rangers they're still losing kind of as they were for the most part, but now they're giving up way more goals. And a big reason that is goaltending. One of the big stories in this game was Jonathan Quick in what may have been his last game, played in LA against the Kings. Right? Who knows what his future looks like, and obviously he's up there in age, so we'll see. But really the loss of Shesterkin and Fox have been massive, and that's not much of a surprise. But really, Shesterkin specifically, like when Fox, and this is to take nothing away from Fox. Like again, those are the two most important. Those are the two most important players as far as I'm concerned on this team in the current iteration of it that you can ill afford to lose. And with Fox out, they certainly, they took a hit that first time he got hurt, and they somewhat were able to tread water. They were able to kind of like stay kind of somewhat in it. But then once you lost Shesterkin and Fox, it's just, they've been really very bad since then, even worse than they had been before. And the Rangers showed fight in this one. I think that their compete level was better in this game than the Ducks game. Although, look, like the Kings jump out to an early lead in a situation where, you kind of, I don't know if falling asleep is the right way to put it, but you got to be locked in, and it's tough. And now there's a little bit more of an excuse just given the state of where they are post letter and everything. But yeah, like work ethic needs to be in a really good place to make up for the deficiencies of the team. And look, they battled to the end. Like this was not. The Kings were due for a win. And that was kind of why I felt like, beyond the fact the Rangers aren't really very good, knowing the Kings, they were coming in, having lost 4 straight and 6 of the last 7, like you had a decent feeling that the Kings were going to find a way to win, and they did. But yeah, I guess let's, kind of jump right into it here. In the lineup, Carson Soucy does return, and it turns out that Carson Soucy and his wife, they had their 3rd daughter. I don't know why we couldn't have been privy to that news a little bit sooner. So I was completely wrong, right? Because I wasn't saying it with any absolutes, but I was saying that, maybe this was somewhat related as a precursor to a potential trade, but really it wasn't. I think Carson Soucy still will be traded. I would be stunned if that weren't the case, but it really had nothing to do with it. So congrats to Carson Soucy. And he was back in the lineup replacing Vakanainen. As far as the defensive pairs were concerned, a little bit of a change in terms of what was recent. If you remember, when Soucy was in there, he was playing with Morrow and they had Robertson and Borgen. But before that, and for most of the season, is what they went back with in this game, which was Soucy with Borgen and Robertson with Morrow. And as far as those pairs were concerned, again, Braden Schneider stands out in a major, major way. And is one of the biggest reasons why, with Fox going down, Schneider just cannot handle that top pair assignment with Gavrikov. Now, Gavrikov, who I should have mentioned, sooner, he actually made his return to LA. And they did a little tribute video for him. Vladislav Gavrikov really, making a name for himself in this league, did a nice job with Columbus in the 4, I guess maybe 3.5 seasons there. And then in his 2.5 seasons with the LA Kings, really upped the ante more. And so he makes his return. Gavrikov actually made a really, really bad play and a bad turnover on the Kings' 2nd goal, right? So that had nothing to do with Braden Schneider, but still, the point is that went from Gavrikov Fox being one of the best pairs in the league to now you probably compare Gavrikov Schneider, you look at that number 1 pair compared to others, it's probably one of the, it's I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It certainly is, one of the worst in the league. That's the difference. It's big. And I thought in this game, I thought that the Robertson-Morrow pair was solid. I thought that this was one of Scott Morrow's better games. And he almost actually, we'll talk about it soon enough, but he almost had his first goals arranger, but he ends up not getting credited for it. But I actually thought that Morrow did a decent job in this one. As far as the forwards were concerned, same as it's been. Matt Rempe continues to be out of the lineup. Again, with that, even though I think it goes down technically as a healthy scratch, you got to think that with Rempe, it's really more of they rushed him back and it's more of an injury thing, right? Because he could certainly, it's been a lot of games in a row. I think he'll be back somewhat soon unless there was a setback suffered. But, and I hadn't mentioned it because it wasn't that big a deal, but Anton Bleed, he had been called up before the Anaheim game with them going out west. And I don't think it had nothing to do with any potential trades. I think just simply put, they wanted to have a little bit more insurance. And maybe it speaks more to Rempe more than anything, that he just really isn't in a great place where if there was an injury or if there was a scratch made, that Bleed might be the one that goes in the lineup. Anyway, as far as the lines were concerned, the Miller Zibanejad Perot line, they've been pretty good since they put them together. And JT Miller scores a couple of goals in this game. Now, really, the last one had nothing to do with, that was a 6-on-5 goal that had nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But one of the goals was, and speaking of that line, Zibanejad, he extends his point streak to 10 games. Unfortunately, Artemi Panarin's 10-game point streak, and even more specifically, 10-game assist streak ends. And yeah, like the Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line, like that one, we know what that is. And again, that was once a great line a couple years ago, and it goes back together somewhat out of necessity. But that line, is just not very good at this juncture, right? Like I wouldn't say they were bad in this game, but they weren't really good either. They didn't, there weren't like crazy defensive fuck ups, but they didn't really give you that offense that was needed. And when you look at both of those lines, and this is just the reality. Miller's the manager, Perot. Those are players that are likely to be here next season, right? Like very likely to be here. Whereas that Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line, totally different story. Like they all, like, let's look at it in the terms of the start of next season, right? Like the trade, we could do it in the context of the trade deadline, and that's fine too. And I think the statement still holds, but let's say the start of next season, again, that's the Zibanejad centered line, maybe that does become a thing, right? Like to look at it optimistically. Whereas that Trocheck line, I think that at least 2/3 of those players are likely gone, if not all of them. The Noah Laba line in this game, I thought was solid. Whereas I didn't really like how they played. Often individually, I thought played well against Anaheim, but the Laba line, I thought got hemmed in a bit against Anaheim. I thought they were better in this game, and they actually had a goal. What was interesting was, though, the fourth line was not very good. And I don't really bring them up much because usually like they don't really score much, but they don't typically give up many goals. They don't play a whole lot, but in this game, not great. And it ended up being a situation where Johnny Brodzinski was just flat out benched for the whole third period, as far as I could tell. And I think the numbers reflect that. He only had 7 shifts, played less than 6 minutes. And really just in general, that fourth line didn't play much in the third. But for the 2 or 3 shifts they did, someone replaced Brodzinski on that fourth line. And I don't believe it was injury related. I think it was just a straight benching. But not to say, but honestly, Carrick and Radish didn't do much better either. They faltered. I believe it was the fourth goal where they were unable to get the puck out of the zone and allowed a goal there. So, again, like they haven't really been a major factor one way or another, that fourth line, but I thought in this game, they were not very good. So for the Kings, in goal, starting was Darcy Kemper. But it ends up almost being a blessing in disguise for the Kings as far as this game was concerned. Because Kemper did allow a couple of goals to start. Now, really, honestly, one of them wasn't his fault at all. The other one, maybe, like, it wasn't like he was bad by any means, but he, gets into a collision with Johnny Brodzinski towards the end of the first period, and Anton Forsberg comes in and really saves the day for the LA Kings. He really was a major reason why they won this game. So, again, 18 seconds into the game, Adrian Kempe scores the 17th goal of the season, assisted by Clark and Perry. And I should also say that, I mentioned in the Ducks episode that Kopitar wasn't going to play, which was true. Drew Doughty actually was a scratch. He was sick. So a lot of the, players that you're accustomed to, the longtime Kings, in Kopitar and Doughty were not in the lineup against their former goalie, Jonathan Quick. But Kempe, who's one of the longer tenured Kings, scores, like I said, his 17th goal of the season from Clark and Perry at 18 seconds. And it's another one of those things where Braden Schneider gets caught up by us, which has happened a lot lately. And it's a 2-on-2 that kind of becomes a 3-on-2 where JT Miller is unable to get back in time, trying to kind of make up for Braden Schneider. And it's a quick passing play where Kempe is able to score off the feed from Clark to make it 1-0 Kings. Then at 1:33, Matthew Robertson trips Kevin Fiala. Matthew Robertson has definitely been taking a decent amount of penalties lately. Has been something that I believe I've noticed, and I think the stats would back that up. But the Rangers do kill that off. The Kings don't have a very good power play. I think it's one of the worst in the league. And then at 8:18, after I believe the Kings, I think Quentin Byfield had a breakaway opportunity that he shot wide. Soon thereafter, the Rangers tied up. It's Will Cooley scoring his 11th goal in the season, assisted by Morrow and Laba. And Cooley has not exactly been producing out lately. And it was a pretty nondescript, fortunate goal for Cooley individually, but a nice job by that line where Laba dumps it in. Othman does good job of, sort of having puck positions, throws it over to Laba, finds Morrow. He shoots it. It goes off of Kemper, off the defender and in. But I guess on the way, I think what Cooley must have deflected it on the initial Morrow shot. So originally ruled a Morrow goal, which would have been his first goal as a Ranger, is a Will Cooley goal, and it ties the game up at 1. So the third line gets the goal there, but then a quick response by the Kings. Only 42 seconds later, it's Kevin Fiala scoring his 18th goal of the season unassisted. And what happens here, it's a defensive zone draw for the Rangers. Sam Carrick wins it back to Gavrikov, and Gavrikov tries to move it over from left to right, but it gets intercepted by Kevin Fiala and easily put in. So a rare mistake by Gavrikov. I don't think there's anyone else to blame there, but you just don't see that from him often. And I don't know, maybe it was just his former teammate just kind of knowing his tendencies, but it's 2-1 Kings right there. But the Rangers do tie it up by period's end. It was a pretty even period, and the shot count was 8-8 as well. But it's JT Miller at 16:36 scoring his 12th goal of the season, assisted by Zibanejad and Braden Schneider. This was a faceoff won by Miller. Rangers are able to work it around a bit and just easy passing. And Miller drops it off to Zibanejad, who finds Miller, who beats Byfield. And Miller easily scores past Kemper. So a nice goal by that line off of the one faceoff. Then, like I said, late in the period, Kemper leaves the game. Forsberg comes in. And then the second period, the Kings are able to get the goals they need, right? It wasn't necessarily a horrible period by the Rangers. They kind of picked up play, and it wasn't like they got dominated, but the Kings were able to get it done. And at 4:23, Taylor Ward scores his first goal of the season, assisted by Malat and Hellenius. So the fourth line gets the goal for the Kings, and just not a great goal by Jonathan Quick here. Even if there maybe is some blame to go around a little bit, this is where it actually was the Trocheck line, which was, that was on for that goal. So I kind of stand a little bit corrected before where, they were on for that goal against. But again, it's one that Jonathan Quick would want to have back. A pass from behind, sort of from the corner from Malat to Ward, and Ward scores where Quick just wasn't really ready. He didn't pick it up. He just was a little bit slow and kind of, seeing where it was, and it makes it 3-2 Kings. Then from there, the Rangers have a power play opportunity. And it was really their only power play chances of the game. But it's another game where they have a 5-on-3. Look, the Ranger power play has actually been good lately. But it was Laferriere after like a scrum, after a whistle. Laferriere is called for roughing Will Cooley at 8:22. Then 25 seconds into the power play, Edmondson trips Vincent Trocheck. So the Rangers have a power play for 1 minute and 35 seconds, 5-on-3. And they had chances. So it wasn't, in 5-on-3, of course, you should on a 5-on-3, but they are unable to score past Forsberg. So that's 2 games in a row. Third period of the Duck game, second period here where, with the 2-man advantage, they were unable to tie the game. And then a little bit after that expires, the Kings make it 4-2. It's Andrei Kuzmenko scoring his 10th goal of the season, assisted by Fiala and Turcotte. And this was where Carrick and even more so Radish were unable to clear the puck. It was kept in at the blue line, and sort of a simple shot by Fiala. He's stopped by Quick, but the rebound is put in by Kuzmenko where Carson Soucy was the only guy in front. So again, that puck needs to get out of the zone, doesn't, and ends up in the back of the Rangers' net. Those are things that can't happen, and the Rangers too often are unable to clear the puck out of their zone, and it ends up being a goal again. So 4-2 Kings, and then you get a couple of Braden Schneider penalties. So again, and the Rangers killed them both off, but again, to add to the whole Braden Schneider rhetoric, it's been tough. And Braden Schneider is someone that, look, I would not mind trading. I think we know who he is at this point. I think that there's value. I think that the league, there's still value there, like, pretty solid value as well. Like, I think you can get a decent return back for Braden Schneider. And that's someone that I would certainly consider trading away. So at 12:56, he trips Quentin Byfield. And then at 16:11, he interferes with Joel Edmondson. And, in both cases, the Kings do not score. So we go to the third period with the Kings up 4-2. And I'd say that midway through the third, there was a King goal that ended up being disallowed. The goal would have been Laferriere, but it ended up being a goalie interference that took it off the board. I believe it was Corey Perry that was the one that went in there, I think. And so the score remains 4-2. And the Rangers, I'd say this, they were pushing. I mean, I think the first half of the period actually was maybe, was even better by the Rangers than the second half, but tough to totally say that with, total confidence. But the Rangers pulled the goalie. So it's a 6-on-5 late. And, just before that, the Kings came pretty close to an empty net goal, but, were unsuccessful. And on a one face-off by Vincent Trocheck, the Rangers were able to score past Forsberg for the first time with 27 seconds left, and it's JT Miller scoring his second goal of the game, 13th goal of the season, assisted by Gavrikov. So Gavrikov gets a point against his former team, and Vincent Trocheck. So a pretty innocent shot by Miller that finds its way past Forsberg. I'm not totally sure how it did happen, but it does. And then the Rangers actually did make it kind of interesting at the very end. They're able to get an offensive zone draw with a little less than 5 seconds left off of a Kings icing. And the faceoff is won by the Rangers. Panarin's able to actually get the shot through, and it goes to Trocheck, who tries to kind of wrap it past Forsberg. And Zibanejad was in the vicinity as well, but unsuccessful. So the Ranger comeback falls short, and they lose 4-3 to the Los Angeles Kings, dropping now to 21-24-6. Which again, they are, I would be shocked. Like, if they don't finish last Eastern Conference, that would be shocking. But as far as the whole NHL is concerned, like I keep on saying, the Canucks are going to finish in last. Like, I don't see how anyone's going to catch them for that last spot. But, the Rangers are almost certain to me, even if Shesterkin and Fox, well, they're going to come back, Shesterkin and Fox, but of course, the Rangers will be trading out players as well. Again, they're going to lose a lot of games here. Next game for the Rangers to finish off the road trip and West Coast trip is against the San Jose Sharks, who are playing some pretty good hockey. They are coming off of they're going to be coming off of a loss to the Tampa Bay Lightning, but they had won the night before against the Panthers. Like, they're playing pretty well, and they beat, what kind of got the Sharks jump started a little bit was, that early season overtime win. I think it was 6-5. It was the one where Taylor Radish had the hat trick, and the Sharks won that game. So you have to respect Macklin Celebrini. He is one of the best players in the game, like, flat out. It has been a remarkable, second year for Macklin Celebrini. And, in some ways, is it a one-man show for the Sharks? Yes, it is. And that really more speaks to how good Celebrini is. But he is going to be tough to stop. And we'll see, though. San Jose, it's kind of, it's similar to when the Rangers played the Flyers, where the way the schedule worked with the Flyers, they had a lot of road games before and after. It was one just random home against the Rangers, and we saw kind of how that went. So maybe there's something to be said there, where it's kind of same thing for the Sharks. They were on the road, they come back for this one game, and they go back on the road. So maybe the Rangers catch them at sort of a weird time. But all is to say is that while San Jose, they are not a great defensive team, like, there are definitely offensive opportunities to be had there. Like, I kind of see the Sharks game as maybe more similar to the Anaheim Ducks game, where, it may be a 4-3, 5-4 type game. But the Rangers will have their hands full with the young talent on San Jose, as they did at Madison Square Garden. And I would expect, of course, Jonathan Quick to be in net for that one. I don't see why he wouldn't be there. And then they'll head home. And at that point, after the Sharks game, they will only have, I believe, 5 more games till the Olympic break, 6 including the Sharks game. So again, Rangers lose. They're 2-8-2 in the last 12 games. We could come up with a bunch of other bad, I chose that one, but there's a bunch of other ones as well, as far as just, how bad the losing has been. But yep, they fall to the Los Angeles Kings by a final score of 4-3. And now they will head to San Jose to take on the Sharks to complete their West Coast trip.